Welcome back, welcome back. You see it from the barber's chair. I'm still the host, and we still got the co-host behind the scene. One day you'll get to see how fine she is. But we're gonna conclude these episodes for today with this piece right here, and hopefully you'll learn a little something about me.
All right. Tell us about the era that you or the eras that you grew up in Baltimore.
The era I grew up in was the late '70s, um, early '80s, mid '80s. Um, I'm a Generation X baby, so I'm cut from the cloth of Malcolm and them. So um, during that time, there's so many angles to evaluate, so many different topics to talk about in that era. I could start from being real young as a kid, being on the porch, like we say, watching it all go down. And Baltimore is one of those cities where you don't have to worry about being in a bored neighborhood. It's going down everywhere, So I remember being on the porches and watching it all go down. Then, as I got a little older, I remember being in the middle of the street, playing around. And the next thing you know, I was one of the ones making it go down. And it was a lot of fun times when I was younger. We did things like we played a lot of sports when I was younger. We played a lot of sports. Sports gurus. We watched all the games. We played all the games. Before the Nintendo and the Sega Genesis and all of that, you only had the Atari, and ColecoVision and the Beta Max and things of that nature. Those primitive games, that might have been only 2 or 3 bit, you know. But we had like electronic football, where we painted our players and put stickers on their helmets and used sponges for footballs. And all you had to do is plug the thing up and the men to move on their own, and you have to set them up on the field to run their own plays. We used to have the old school recording cameras. See, we ain't had these little small devices now, the cell phones and all of these instant cameras and digital cameras. It was that big gigantic thing you had to put on your shoulder back then. And we used to be recording our games, our tournaments. And I can legitimately say, as a young kid, I probably went to the basketball court every day. Um, uh, if I wasn't going to the basketball court, it was because it was schools. It was time for school to be in session, and you're more focused on doing homework and stuff like that. But in the summertime, I can't think of a day growing up in the summer when I didn't go to the basketball court. And we would stay down there and play basketball for like 5, 6 hours straight, and come back sweaty and smelly and hop in the shower and get dressed and just hang out on the stoop in front of the house or on the sidewalk in the neighborhood. And the neighborhood had such camaraderie. Everybody was so much together, the females and males. We looked out for our blocks back then. Everybody was family, whether you fought each other or not. If you came on that block, you had to deal with the whole block. So, I can't remember a day my brother and I, my cousins and my other friends, we didn't go to the basketball court. We was on the court every day. For those of you who don't know, they used to call me Magic. I never had a chance to play in high school or go to the NBA, but I was exceptional in the neighborhood. At least I believe so. Um, we played football as much as we could in the middle of the street. We played tackle football in the middle of the street, and one of the OGs from the neighborhood was the oldest guy one of the oldest guys on the block that was around our age bracket, but he was the oldest, and somebody like my dad's age, they would be like team captains and pick the teams, and we played tackle football in the middle of the street, tackle football in the backyard, tackle football behind the school on the football field. We take the whole neighborhood to the football field and get a game going. It was nothing to do that growing up. We had a lot of fun. And I, every year as a young kid, we had summer camp at a school at which we never enrolled, but we went every day as if we were enrolled. Uh, so I can't say I had a dull moment as a kid. It was always fun. It's very dangerous as well. Growing up in Baltimore is a very dangerous city. There's been a time where we walked my mother to the store to get something to eat, and just out of nowhere, my mother throws us into some sticker bushes, and we looking like, has she lost her mind? Like, what's going on? And what she saw was a whole shootout going on that we're not even paying attention to as kids. So they were having a shootout with police officers having a shootout with some bank robbers. And bullets were flying, and we were just lollygagging, not paying attention, but my mother was. And she threw us behind some sticker bushes and got down on the ground herself. And so that's some of my experiences. I remember back in the early 80s, mid 80s, where, there was recreational parks open everywhere in the city. There was rec centers open everywhere in the city. If you wanted to find something to do, just go to a rec center. They had basketball courts in there, bowling alleys. They had boxing. They teach you how to box. And there was rec centers all over the city. And the city also had community rec, which came with a community pool. So, during those times, you could be in any part of the city and go swimming in the summer. Didn't need a pass. You didn't need none of that. All you had to do is show up with a towel, and they had lifeguards on duty. But that was during that time. All of that has dissipated now. I can't even think of a rec center that's open down there in Baltimore, but or a community pool, except for Drew Hill Park. And to my understanding, that has been closed for so long that some kids snuck in there, broke in, and went swimming. Took the cover off the pool and went swimming. So we had a lot of activity growing up in that Generation X era as I was coming up. In the 90s, Baltimore just got that much crazier. 90s, when I'm able to be a whole lot more active, so I get to experience a whole lot more. The 90s was a lot of shaking and baking, and there's no pun intended because we actually have a skating ring in Baltimore on Pennsylvania Avenue called Shake and Bake. But it was a lot of shaking and baking going on in that city, from police using abuse of power and authority, racism, political racism, injustice, stick-up boys who lived to rob somebody. You had dope dealing everywhere. One thing about that city is I got introduced to what is called open air drug markets, and that's when the whole block is pushing, and it's an experience, to just walk on a block and be able to get just whatever you want, because the whole block is supportive of that hustle. You know what I mean? So they had what it was called open air drug markets, and also during that time of them 80s and 90s, the state of Maryland, because of Baltimore's drug activity, they were called Lady Heroin, because of how much heroin was being pumped through that city and that state. And Baltimore used to be almost a mecca, kind of like Washington, D.C. was the original chocolate city. Now it's Atlanta, Georgia, but Baltimore was a mecca. A lot of history there. A lot of successful black people were there. Frederick Douglass settled there. It's a lot of history there. The oldest black art museum in the world, is there. We have our annual AFRAMs, African American festivals, and uh, you know, it's so much that that city does as far as culture is concerned. But um, you know, it's a lot of experiences, and it's a rough city, and it's one of those places you roll with it or get rolled over. Um, I remember I was talking about back in those 80s, you know, um, I lost my train of thought. What was I was leading into something back in the 80s. You remember where I was at?
Mm,
Okay. So she's not listening to me. How do you expect our viewers to listen
baby,
if
oh
you
my
not? No, I'm
God.
just joking.
Baby, baby, I went back there with you. Oh my God.
So anyway, okay, that's where I was going with it.
Okay.
I remember a time in those 80s, in them early 90s, them 80s especially, where black power stood for something. And it was not about trying to be anti-Caucasian or any other race of people. You're not gonna find that in that city. That city is so diverse, and in my opinion, it seems like everybody wants to be black in that city. So you're not gonna find a lot of you know younger folks practicing racism in that city. It's the older ones, those baby boomers and the generation before them, the prohibition people, those people study racism and practice racism. But the younger generation, the Generation X's, the millennials and Generation Z's, and all of these ones that come down after that, no, everybody seems to get along. Nobody's looking at the color of nobody's skin. Everybody's getting judged by the content of their character. So it's mainly the older folks. But I remember a time where that pro-black camaraderie was at an all-time high. People was wearing those HBCUs, college sweatshirts. They was wearing African medallions, as if it was a gold chain or something. Um, all of those days are gone. And I said that to say, as we moved into the 90s, the 90s brought about a whole different era. And you start to realize the corruption, for somebody like me, at my age, you start to realize a whole lot of corruption on a whole lot of different levels, the older you get. And you start to meet a lot of people as well, and Baltimore is full of a lot of interesting people. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna tell you, the nightlife is out of this world. And I've been to other states, and their nightlife was great, but I don't know how it is now in Baltimore. But that nightlife back then was out of this world. It was a city that never sleeps, and I don't know what it is now because I don't hang out. But um, very interesting city. And the '90s came in and brought a lot of detriment, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. The older you get in that city, if you're not positioned right, that stuff starts crashing down on you. You know what I mean? You're no longer innocent anymore. The environment starts to affect you the older you get. And we have things like The Wire, who that was on the number one show on HBO for a long time. 5 different seasons of it. Um, the Wire was a uh, like they say, based on a true story. And that's to keep from incriminating anybody. But most of that story that they were telling had truth to it because I was right there. When it was all taking place, and and it blew my mind when I found out that show was on TV because I had no clue. And so you had shows like The Corner, that was written by Charles Dutton. And I don't know if you remember a TV show from back in the '80s called The Rock, where Charles Dutton played the role of a husband, and he worked for um, the trash department in Baltimore. And that was based on a true story. He was really a trash man in Baltimore. So you had that story being told about the kingpins and the drug epidemic that rolled in the late '60s, early '70s. You had that, and then it was updated to the things that took place in the late '90s, going into the 2000s. And then you had in that late '90 era is when we got a football team again, the Baltimore Ravens, and and we also won a Super Bowl, and we beat the New York Giants, but we end up getting one of New York's. I'm not gonna say what his job title was, but we end up getting one of their employees after that took place. A gentleman by the name of Martin O'Malley, who went on to become Baltimore's mayor. And Mayor O'Malley is the one who initiated the zero tolerance rule and put a curfew out for anybody who was under the age of 18 years old. They couldn't be outside after 9 o'clock. And through that zero tolerance policy, they were able to crack down and dissolve a lot of crime families and drug cartels, which caused thousands of people to get locked up and go to prison. And, this is where we get The Wire from. So that is the conclusion of that era being produced to you in a TV series called The Wire. And the only thing it won't give you is the point where Martin O'Malley comes into play. So Baltimore is very interesting. Born and bred there, love my city, and I feel like my city love me, and I'm talking about the people. And but that was then, this is now, and I enjoy going back to visit. My family is there. My sons are there. My mother is there. And I still got love there. That's the city that raised me. So that's Baltimore.